Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about the global arms trade and arms transfer. The latest data from SIPRI is out, the Stockholm International Peace and Research Institute, which is one of the major providers of data of companies that manufacture arms, countries that sell, countries that import. So this is the industry standard in terms of data availability of weapons transfers, etc. And clearly, there are some major shifts and changes in the global arms trade. It is very clear right away that India and the United States are now dominating the global arms trade. The biggest exporter of arms, the United States, continues to consolidate its market share, and it is the biggest exporter of arms. And India has now become the biggest importer of arms. So the US is exporting about 42% of the global arms exports. So it has a 42% market share of global arms that are exported. And of all the total weapons that are sold worldwide, India has now become the biggest importer and about 10% of the global market. So I will start sharing the data with you. But so look at this. These are the top 25 exporters of weapons. So the first point that I want to make, I have 8 takeaways from this data. But before we go into that, please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and remember to share this video with your socio-political network after you have finished watching this. So here we go. So this is the chart that shows you the top 25 countries that export weapons and have exported weapons in the last 4 years. So this data is not just 1 year, it's from 2019 till 2023. So in the last 4 years, these were the top 25 countries that were exporting. So the first takeaway right away is for everybody in India to notice that India is not one of the top 25 countries when it comes to export of arms. We have been hearing for the last 2 years a lot of talk about made in India and becoming Atmanirbhar when it comes to industry, manufacturing, weapons. The data doesn't substantiate any of those claims. So India is not one of the top 25 exporters of weapon. Iran is, it's exporting weapons. It's number 25. It's exporting to Russia, Venezuela, and Houthis. UAE is also an exporter of arms. That is stunning. UAE is exporting more arms than India. It's exposed to Jordan, Egypt, and Algeria. I wonder what they make. And of course, you can see that there has been a slight change or a very significant change depending upon how you're looking at it. Russia has gone from being the second largest exporter of weapons to number 3 position. So this is the second takeaway. One, that India is not in the top 25. The other is Russia has moved from number 2 to number 3, and France has moved from number 3 to number 2. So if you look at it, Russia has lost 50% of its market in the last 4 years. Part of it is because India is shifting away from Russia. And I'll show you the data. In spite of all the talk about standing with Russia and being friends, India is systematically and steadily abandoning its weapons dependence on Russia. And I'll show you when I talk about imports. And that's probably why Russia has lost 50% of its market share. So it has gone from having 21% of the global market share in the year 2014 to 2018. So basically, in Narendra Modi's first term, Russia had 21% of the market share, and in his second term, Russia has only 11%. India still is the market for 34% of all of Russia's exports. China is number 2, and Egypt is number 3. So clearly, Russia is exporting into what we call as the emerging markets, BRIC. This is all within the BRICS, and sending it to the global south. Germany, Italy, UK are also in the top 10. Israel is also in the top 10. South Korea is rising as an exporter of weapons. It's exporting to Poland, Philippines, and India also. And interestingly, Turkey is in the top 11 of the countries. So the United States has increased its market share by 17%. So the US now holds 42% of the market share. That is the most important observation, that this is the number one exporter of countries. The United States seeks to guarantee security, peace, development, but it seems to provide weapons which ultimately should be destabilizing. So much proliferation of high quality weapons is scary. So the US has 42% of the share in the year 2019 till now. Before that, it had 34. So you could say that what Russia is losing, US and France are gaining. The biggest market for the United States are Saudi Arabia, number one, which basically got 15% of all of US exports. Japan is number two, and Qatar is number three. So these are probably exports in the early years, like 2019 and 20, during the Trump era, when they were supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia in its war against Yemen. So, and then I suppose it may have dropped, but more recently, the Biden administration has also approved massive sales to Saudi Arabia of weapons. So this is some of the data on exports that I wanted to point out, that the US is now the number one in the market. France has become number two. But I want you to look at number four, which is China. China is now the fourth biggest exporter of weapons. It has been in that position for a while. It has lost 5% of the market. It's gone from 5.9 to 5.8% of the market share. So of the total weapons that are sold, China sells 5.8. So it's a very small market. But what is critical for Indians and who are watching this show is to know that China's biggest two markets are India's neighbors. China's 61% of China's exports are to Pakistan and 11% are to Bangladesh. So 72% of the entire Chinese exports are to South Asia, to India's neighbors. This kind of, I had not, I mean, I knew about Pakistan's dependence on China's weapons. And in fact, while only 61% of China's exports to Pakistan, the reverse, when you look at Pakistan's imports, what comes from China is more than 70% of Pakistan's imports. But Bangladesh was its second biggest market. That is news to me. And that throws a very interesting perspective on India-Bangladesh relations. This idea that both Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are very much in India's camp in South Asia, while Maldives and Pakistan are in China's camp. I'm not very sure about Bangladesh now, since if you have so much military dependence on China, it would be tough to be friendly with India. It's the same situation. Like India was or is still dependent on Russian weapons. So it was, while it is friendly with the US, it has not been able to completely break away from Russia in spite of the US insistence. And Bangladesh could be in the same position that India is in this triangle. So that is an important observation that I wanted to make about imports. Now let's look at the data about imports. So India is the world's biggest importer of weapons in the last 4 years. 9.8% of the global imports have come to India. And they are coming from Russia, which is 36% of Indian weapons, and from France, 33%, and from US, 13%. Now, this has dropped significantly because what this data is telling us is that the share of Western countries' weapons exports to India has gone up significantly. And that is very, very critical. So Russia at one point, which was probably, I think, if we were to look at the data 4 years ago, was exporting 70% of all arms that India was importing. Now you have countries like South Africa, where India is the third biggest market for them. For Poland, India is the third biggest market. For South Korea, India is the third biggest market. For Israel, India is the first market. For Russia, India is the first market. And for US, India has also become a huge market. So, in that sense, India is diversifying its imports, reducing its dependence on Russia, and increasing its uh, dependence, you could say, or getting its more and more of its weapons basically from the West. So that is an important development, that India is now the biggest importer of weapons. It is not in the top 25 exporters, which means that all the manufacturing that India is doing, it's not exporting, it is consuming itself at home. The second biggest importers is Saudi Arabia. So if you look at the data of countries which are buying these weapons, you'll be stunned to see that even though Ukraine has been at war for the last 2 years and billions of dollars have been given to Ukraine from the US and Europe, it is still not the biggest importer. It's not even in the top three, it's number four. And it imports only 5% of the global arms that are being exported in the last 4 years. The biggest importers are India, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar are the top three. But surprisingly, the Middle East is like a huge market. Saudi Arabia is number two, Qatar is number three, Egypt is number seven, and then you have Kuwait at number 12, and UAE at number 14, and Israel number 15, and Turkey at number 17, and at number 21, Algeria. So the Middle East is importing a lot of weapons, and for the Gulf, primarily it's a threat of Iran and Iran's proxies, which is forcing them to buy weapons in such large quantities. Plus, they're rich. They have a lot of disposable income. So I guess they like to buy toys. And so they're buying. It's not as if they're going to go to war. I can't see Qatar going to war anytime soon against anybody, or for that matter, Kuwait. But they, I guess, like to buy weapons because they do have oil money at their disposal. They all depend on security guarantees from the United States. So if Iran were to threaten them, they would immediately run to Uncle Sam. So the second point that I wanted to make was that the Middle East is now a huge importer of weapons. And if you look at the importers, there is no Russia, there is no Iran. In the top 40 countries, you will not find Russia or Iran, which has something very interesting, that they have become, to a great extent, self-sufficient. I mean, these two countries are facing sanctions, so perhaps that's why they're not able to import weapons. But both are more or less at war at the moment. And while Iran is exporting to Russia and to the Houthis, Russia is not importing much. In fact, Russia is exporting to China. China is the 10th biggest importer, and its imports have increased. And they have essentially increased from Russia. So 77% of China's imports are coming from Russia. So China is in the position today that India used to be in the past, where over 70% of its weapons imports are coming from Russia. But China is also a major exporter of weapons. As I said, it's number four. It has about 6% of the market. And what it's importing is very little, only 3%. So China is importing 1/3 or less than that than what India is importing, which means China, which has a bigger defense and military budget, is more Atmanirbhar than India is. It is manufacturing for itself. And I will show you that in a bit, and you will understand China's industry. Another point that I did want to make was to look at the top 100 companies. So if you look at the top 100 companies, if you should go to the website and take a look at it. I can't show you all the top 100, but what I wanted to show you was the top 21 companies that produce and weapons manufacturers. We are not talking about exports. So the top 5 companies, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop, Boeing, and General Dynamics, are all US companies. I mean, they are supplying to the US, and so they have huge budgets. Lockheed is $65 billion in 2021 and nearly 60 in 2022. So the top 5 companies in the world, which are defense manufacturers, are in the US. Now, number 6 is a British company. But if you look at 7, 8, and 9, they are Chinese. And if you look in the top 11, 4 of the top 11 companies, which are manufacturers of defense equipment, are Chinese companies. So in the top 21, you have 7 Chinese companies that are manufacturing weapons. So that tells you the extent of China's development in terms of defense industry and China's self-sufficiency. That's why it's not a major importer. It's not a big exporter. Most of its exports are going to Bangladesh and Pakistan, but apparently that's an interesting question. If China's weapons are good, why aren't others buying them? Maybe they're not very good. And so maybe China is risking its own security by buying weapons for itself. So these are some of the points that I wanted to make. In the top 100 companies manufacturing, there are 3 from India and 5 from France. France is the second biggest exporter of weapons, but in the top 15 companies, you don't see a French company. The biggest French company, Thales, shows up at number 17. So that is an interesting feature to notice, that while France is a big exporter, and I think it is primarily because of the India, that you can see that India is probably making France a big exporter, because 30% of France exports are going to India, and then Qatar and Egypt. So India is primarily responsible, I guess, for the change in ranking. India has cut down its imports from Russia, increases imports from France, and so Russia went from 3 to 2, and France went from 3 to 2, and Russia went from 2 to 3 in the rankings of total exports of weapons. One interesting observation is that if you look at Israel, which is the 9th biggest exporter of weapons, but Israel is also a major importer of weapons at number 15. So 69% or 70% roughly of Israeli imports are coming from the US. I'm surprised that the number is low. I thought it was much higher. 30% of all Israeli weapons are coming from Germany. So all of Israel's imports, 99% of Israeli imports are from Germany and US, and the remaining less than 1% is from Italy. So the surprise to me is that there is no other European country, there is no India. Israel is not importing anything from India at all when it comes to weapons. But India is the biggest market for Israeli weapons. So India is buying about 27%, more than 1/4 of everything that Israel is exporting in weapons is to India. So it's just a one-way trade. I guess Israeli technologies, I guess weapons, etc., is far more superior. So India is buying from Israel, but not able to sell anything to Israel. So that was also another important observation I wanted to make. So this is the data that has come out of Stockholm's Research Institute. Ironically, it calls itself as a Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, but it is more famous for, it's called Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. It's more famous for its weapons database. So this is the latest data that has come out just 2 days ago. And so I thought I will share it with you. It gives us an idea of the changing nature of global politics. So it tells you that, like I said, that the US is the biggest exporter of weapons. India is the biggest importer of weapons. India has doubled its imports until 2014. it was buying only 5% of the weapons that the world was selling, but now India is buying nearly 10% of the weapons that are selling. This is one of the consequences from 2014. So the election of Prime Minister Modi has resulted in India literally doubling its imports of weapons. But it also is an indication of India's threat perceptions, that its geopolitics, especially its deteriorating relations with China since 2020, suggests that India is probably going to ramp up its military acquisitions and its purchases, etc. The US continues to sell a lot of its weapons abroad, and the war in Ukraine has created a huge market. Countries which otherwise would not have been buying weapons are buying huge numbers. Canada, Germany, Finland, Sweden are buying huge amount of F-35s, which are really a high-end product. Each is worth more than $130 million. So for the US, this looks really good. The war in Ukraine is also making Europeans buy American weapons and export it. And all the aid that the US is giving is also going to the US weapons industry. Still, the Middle East is the biggest market for the US. That was, to me, surprising. I thought that by now Europe would have overtaken, but I think in the next edition of this data, or if once we have gone past 2022, so when we get data for 2023, 4, 5, 6, I think we will notice that Europe is buying more weapons from the US than the Middle East. So I hope you found some of this interesting for those of you who are really interested in geopolitics, national power, the weapons market and industry. I hope you found some interesting reflections in this conversation. So please, before you check out, if you have not subscribed to Khanversations, subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon so that you get notifications of my next video, and don't forget to share it with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan.